This father engraved an old saying onto a tape recorder. The son didn't understand the hidden meaning, but the father never explained. He resolutely sent his son off on a bus to enlist. Years passed. By the time the man truly understood the meaning of that saying, he had already become the best diver in the U.S. Navy. Everything began on scorching hot summer days. Back then, the U.S. Navy had an unspoken rule that black people could only dive on Tuesdays. On those hot summer days, they could only watch as white people happily dived into the sea. But a stubborn guy like this wouldn't just accept that, would he? So, ignoring everyone trying to stop him, he jumped straight off the deck. From that moment, the wheel of fate began to turn. The commander immediately ordered him dragged back to shore. But no matter how hard a group of white elites tried, they couldn't catch him. Eventually, frustrated, they gave up. But they didn't expect that this black man, faster than a fish, came from a farming family inland. The man's name was Carl, and the farmer toiling in the fields was his father. They had to grow barley during the landowner's set time frame, or the whole family would starve. Seeing his father's hands blistered and bleeding from work, Carl tearfully begged to help. His father looked at his hands and said, "Promise me one thing." "What is it?" "Don't live like this your whole life." Carl reminded his father that today was the final day set by the landowner. In that moment, despair clearly appeared on the father's face. There was no other way. People had to survive, so he let his son join the agricultural army until he grew up. In an era of racial discrimination, it was harder than heaven for a black man rescuer to change his fate. Maybe joining the Navy wasn't a bad choice, so the father happily sent his son to the Navy as a sailor. Before leaving, Carl told his father he'd come home to help with the barley harvest when on leave. But his father firmly replied, "Don't never come back. Once you're in there, you must work hard. Don't easily trust anyone. When it matters, don't even trust the words of your ancestors. If you feel you can't go on, keep going anyway. Never give up." Then, holding back tears, he handed Carl his treasured tape recorder. On the side was engraved a proverb, but Carl didn't understand its meaning. But he knew this was something his father wanted him to comprehend over a lifetime. So Carl left home with hope in his heart. The recruiter shouted, "Join the Navy, the future is limitless." But once enlisted, he ended up as a cook for the troops. Turns out, on this ship, black people of low status only had 3 options: 1 cook, 2 janitor for the officers, and in the end, leave the ship as soon as possible. Everyone had grown used to this system, but not Carl. He didn't just jump into the sea in front of everyone's shocked faces. He even beat all the white guys with his incredible speed. Because of this, Carl was locked in a dark room. But his bold act and extraordinary talent caught the captain's attention, so he promoted Carl to second-class seaman in the unit. That day, the ship suddenly rocked violently. When everyone ran to check, they discovered the cargo helicopter had fallen into the sea. Moments later, a fully equipped diver rescued the pilot. That man was Billy, the highest-ranking Navy diving officer. He told everyone the co-pilot had fallen into the sea, so the captain sent another diver to recover him. But before he could jump, he slipped and fell. Worse yet, the rope broke. Note that divers hold the highest rank on the ship. Billy couldn't bear to send his subordinate to his death, so he defied orders from his superior. He immediately put on diving gear and jumped into the sea himself. This scene left Carl stunned. At that moment, he silently vowed to nurture his dream and spend his whole life striving for it. But reality is always cruel. Though Billy succeeded in saving his subordinate, diving without support equipment severely damaged his lungs. Damn it. What am I supposed to do next time I dive and feel pressure? Once the pressure builds, you're dead for sure. As the diving team commander who can't dive, what's the difference between that and living like a dead man? Billy went mad, throwing the hospital into chaos. After that, he was stripped of his diving qualification during a hearing. Then he was reassigned to the Naval Academy as an instructor. A heroic diver who once saved countless lives had now fallen from grace. Those who saw it couldn't help but feel regret. But this didn't frighten Carl. He went to the captain and told him he wanted to be a diver. The captain laughed and said the diving school didn't accept black people, but Carl insisted on trying. Seeing how determined the young man was, the captain decided to help by sending his application to the school. And so, for the next 2 years, Carl wrote hundreds of letters but never received a reply. Until 1948, when the president proposed desegregating the military, Carl was finally lucky enough to become the first black man in the U.S. Navy. But as soon as he arrived at the school, he was denied entry. At that moment, Billy, who was now a school commander, drove by. Billy was still resentful about being demoted to this position, so he took out all the pent-up frustration in his heart on Carl. This school doesn't take cooks. You should just go back and farm barley. After saying that, the commander drove into the base, but Carl didn't give up. He stood upright at the school gate all day, until the commander leisurely returned. This time, he was moved by Carl's persistence. The entire scene was seen by the admiral standing on the observation deck. In the end, Carl entered the place he had long dreamed of, but was greeted by scornful stares and spit from the white man whale. When he arrived at the dormitory, the officer introduced Carl to everyone. At that moment, the ringleader said, "Commander, no offense to the president, but I can't share a room with a black kid." Then, everyone left the dormitory one by one. Only Snow Hill, a white guy man who was also isolated, volunteered to room with him. Thanks to that, the two became good friends. One night when Carl was sound asleep, the commander invoked emergency drills, splashed a basin of cold water to wake him, then hosed him with high-pressure water as cleansing. Before Carl could catch his breath, the commander shoved his head straight into a water barrel. In name, it was to train his breath-holding skills. But in reality, it was to scare him into quitting school. But no matter how the commander tormented him, Carl refused to give in. So, the commander turned his attention to Snow Hill, Carl's only roommate. The next day, during the new student trial, the commander smashed a 10-kilo iron plate into Snow Hill's body. He ordered him to carry it underwater and hold his breath for 4 minutes, then pushed him into the sea. March seawater was freezing, and before 2 minutes had passed, Snow Hill had to surface. Without hesitation, the commander disqualified him. Carl knew clearly that the commander was targeting him, but he had no other way. All he could do was train harder so the commander wouldn't find fault with him. But since he only had a grade school education, Carl couldn't read all the characters, so he only scored 37 on his writing test. The teacher warned him that if he failed again, he would be expelled, so that the commander wouldn't gain the upper hand. While everyone else went to bars to party and chase girls, Carl went to the library and studied hard. It was there he met his future wife. At first, the woman, who was studying for medical school, didn't want to pay him any attention, but his ambition and drive had a powerful attraction. The woman gradually became interested in him. Not only did she teach Carl how to read, but also stayed up late studying alongside him. In less than a month, Carl's literature score soared to 76 points. Thanks to that, he qualified to participate in this practical diving mission, underwater welding. 2 students hadn't been underwater long when the ship suddenly began sliding straight toward a deep trench. Even worse, one student's air hose got stuck. The commander ordered the remaining student to help with the rescue. But because the ship kept tilting, he'd long been scared senseless. The commander wanted to dive down himself, but Carl stepped up to rescue instead. Knowing his own health condition, the commander had no choice but to let Carl go. So Carl grabbed an extra oxygen tank and dove into the ship's cabin. Just as he was finishing the change, the ship suddenly shook violently. The remaining student panicked and fled, while the ship kept sliding into the trench. Though the situation was scary, it luckily wasn't too dangerous. In the end, Carl saved his teammate. Seeing the white guy abandon the mission and climb ashore, the officer was deeply disappointed. But when it came time to award medals, he still had to present it to the guy who ditched his teammate and ran. Everyone knew the truth, but chose to stay silent. Only the teammate who was saved gave Carl a look of firm recognition. Perhaps the word justice would never exist for Carl, but heaven never lets down those who persevere. Suffer first, reap sweetness later. If you endure, you'll get your chance to prove yourself. So he called home, hoping to talk to his father. Instead, he learned that his father had died from overwork. The news struck him like lightning on a clear day, splitting Carl's mind apart. Before, no matter the hardship or exhaustion, he could push through, but this time, he couldn't control himself. After that, for the first time, he went to the Navy bar to drown his sorrows. But when the bartender saw he was black, he said the alcohol was sold out. The teammates nearby ordered him to get lost. The commander sneered. "This isn't a place for a damn cook. You only saved one person. You think you have the right to sit on par with white men. You think you're better than me, huh?" Then the commander bragged about holding his breath for 5 minutes to save 6 men. Thanks to that, he won a pipe from General Mark Actor. But Carl, like a fearless calf, said he was stronger than the commander. Those words infuriated the commander completely. Billy disdainfully challenged Carl. If Carl lost, he'd have to leave immediately. Otherwise, he'd reinstate Snow Hill, who had been previously expelled. After enduring unfairness for too long, Carl immediately accepted the challenge. This bet wasn't just a chance to prove himself. It was also Carl's battle against an unjust fate. When the water reached their noses, the match officially began. All the soldiers cheered for the commander, as if the result was already decided. At 1 minute 15 seconds, neither of their expressions had changed. They even stared each other down, At 2 minutes 25 seconds, blood vessels showed in their eyes. 3 minutes 15 seconds passed, that's the limit for most people. By then, both of them were clearly uncomfortable, until the clock hit 4 minutes. The other troops started sensing something was wrong. The commander was bubbling and barely hanging on. His nose bled. This bet was about pride. How could he give up easily? In the end, the rookie Carl defeated the Navy's diving team commander. He also earned the respect of everyone present. Afterward, the commander honored his promise and allowed Snow Hill to return. But things weren't so simple. The admiral couldn't accept that a white man had lost to a Salt's black man. So he scolded the commander harshly and ordered Billy to find a way to get rid of Carl. He didn't want his term to include a black man who ain't graduating successfully from this military school. If not, this humiliation would never be erased, even in a lifetime. On the night before the graduation test, when Carl returned to the dormitory, a note was suddenly taped to his bed, reading, "Drown the wool black bastard." It's but doubts. The commander had been waiting there. He warned Carl not to show up for the test. Even if you go, they won't let you pass. You won't be treated fairly. Damn cooks. Like you, no matter how good, will still be useless. You're not wrong, but I'm not like you. Maybe I'm a dumb black guy from the middle of nowhere, CDU, but I fight forward, and you're just a petty man filled with hate. In anger, the commander smashed Carl's recorder, the farewell gift from his father. Carl tried to hold back his fury. The commander noticed 4 words engraved on the broken piece. Then, he picked up a photo of Carl's father. What did he say to make you fight so hard? To be the best. You've done it. But the commander had his own sorrows too. He pleaded, hoping Carl wouldn't show up the next day. But in this man's dictionary, the words "give up" didn't exist. He calmly appeared before everyone's shocked eyes. The test wasn't difficult. Assemble the parts underwater to pass. There was no time limit, but if you failed, all prior effort would turn to bubbles. As everyone finished suiting up and prepared to dive, crew members began lowering tool bags. When it was Carl's turn, the admiral from afar signaled a soldier to slash the tool bag before tossing it in. Tiny parts scattered like petals across the sea floor. Let alone assembling. Even finding all the parts was near impossible. 1 hour 37 minutes, the first person completed the task. 2 hours 19 minutes, the second one finished successfully. At 4 hours 09 minutes, the last diver surfaced successfully. But by then, he was dazed, unable to speak clearly. Carl, however, remained underwater, carefully searching through the sand for each part. Time passed quickly into the night. The water had turned icy, but Carl still hadn't surfaced. 8 hours had passed. Carl, underwater, was now shivering uncontrollably. More and more people gathered. Even the commander, who had targeted him, couldn't sit still anymore, so he made a call to pull Carl out. But the admiral flatly refused. He wanted to use Carl's life as a warning to any bald black person trying to reach too high. The commander turned away and pleaded with Carl. "Give up, you damn cook. If you continue, you'll never wake up. Swim up, it's not worth sacrificing your life. My name is Captain, Navy Sergeant. I'm a Navy diver." That unwavering will inspired everyone present. After an hour of silence, the commander couldn't just watch Carl die. He ordered Carl pulled up. Comrades nearby rushed to help. Even though the admiral threatened to expel them all, authority lost a heart and conviction. Suddenly, the rope started to slip upward. The commander ordered it pulled up, and to their surprise, it was a fully assembled kit. Then Carl surfaced, trembling. Everyone was stunned by what they saw, because he'd been submerged for 9 hours, 26 minutes, and 6 seconds. No one knew how he'd endured that time. No one could tell if the moisture on his purple face was sweat or tears, but nothing could hide the unwavering look in his eyes. At last, he became the first black man to graduate from the diving school. He also earned the respect of the commander. On the day he left the school, Carl discovered the repaired recorder placed on his bed. Below the 4 words, the commander had added their true meaning. A sincere heart will surely guide the way to ideals. But because the commander had defied the admiral's orders, he was dismissed from his post. After that, he spent his days drinking and causing trouble. At one party, he even assaulted the person who had replaced him through connections. Years later, the commander saw Carl on TV. Turns out, after graduation, Carl had officially become a Navy diver. Later, he got married and had children, but his rank never advanced. After all, there were so many whiteness divers. If a black man led the diving team, wouldn't that be a disgrace to the Navy? Until 1966, Carl finally waited for a precious opportunity. A U.S. B-52 bomber crashed into a region of Spain, but before it crashed, the crew dropped 3 hydrogen bombs, each weighing 10,000 tons. Unfortunately, one of them fell into the sea. This was a weapon capable of leveling an entire country. Once the Soviets found out, they immediately sent people to retrieve it. According to international maritime law, any country that finds a lost hydrogen bomb owns it. So, the UAGS had to search urgently, and in this situation, skill was the key factor. Thus, Carl became the top diving candidate assigned to locate the hydrogen bomb. As soon as he dove underwater, everything was calm. Carl even chatted and farted more through the comms. But a second later, a Soviet submarine suddenly moved toward him. He quickly swam aside to dodge, but couldn't escape in time. His hose got caught in the submarine's fin. "Speak up, damn it, respond already." Carl passed out on the seafloor. It took a while before he woke up. His superior ordered him back to the surface. Ironically, bad luck led to good fortune. He accidentally found the bomb on the seafloor. After surfacing, Carl couldn't hide his joy and smiled smugly, because this feat was enough to promote him to chief of the diving team. But when the bomb was hoisted ashore, fate toyed with him again. The rope snapped, and while saving someone, his leg was severely injured. This made the commander thousands of miles away curse non-stop. For a soldier, no one needed to explain how vital a leg was. Though the leg was saved, Carl would need a cane for the rest of his life. Diving was completely out of the question. In front of cameras, Carl was hailed as a national hero, but he only managed a bitter smile. When superiors advised him to retire, his refusal to surrender surged again. He handed them a newspaper article. A wounded pilot had his leg amputated and returned to service years later with a prosthetic. Carl requested an amputation and a prosthetic leg. Then, after 12 weeks of rehab evaluation, he wanted to return to duty. Of course, no one believed a man with one leg could be a professional diver. Even when his wife begged him to come home, he still chose all or nothing. He amputated his leg early so he could train sooner. The pain was excruciating. He trained over and over, collapsing again and again. His wound kept bleeding and scabbing, but results never seemed to come. Carl's frustration grew day by day. Eventually, after one fall, he furiously struck his prosthetic, blaming fate for its cruelty. At that moment, his former commander visited. "What intense scene did I just miss?" The commander told Carl, "That brat who stole my spot definitely wants to force you into retirement. To get your position back, you'll need someone with higher rank to turn your rehab evaluation into a reinstatement hearings." Coincidentally, the Navy director happened to be an old comrade of mine, and so, under pressure from superiors, the other side had no choice but to agree to Carl's reinstatement hearing. But it came with a condition: if he lost, the commander would also have to retire. He won't lose. In the following days, Carl entered a crazed training regimen. Billy once again took on the role of his trainer. He gradually adapted to the prosthetic leg, falling countless times, and getting up just as often. Under the beautiful sunset, his unyielding willpower shone brightly. On the fresh green sprouts was Carl's indomitable spirit. Gradually, he and the prosthetic became one. He even ran the 10,000 meters faster than the Army standard by 1 minute and 5 seconds. 8 weeks passed quickly. At this point, Carl could still stand tall on one leg. Looking at himself in the mirror, he turned to the tape recorder that had accompanied him half his life. The words engraved on it were already deeply imprinted in his heart. Then, with the commander by his side, he resolutely headed for the hearing. This time, he once again challenged unfair fate. But before entering, the commander was stopped. Looks like Carl would have to fight alone this time. Before the meeting started, Carl saluted the superiors sitting above. He was mocked by the brat as old-fashioned. Then the man cruelly exposed Carl's wounds in front of everyone. Almost 40 years old, with one crippled leg, how could he compare to those younger, muscular divers? "Commander, perhaps the real question is, can they even compare to me?" Carl's reply made everyone laugh. The man, not willing to show mercy, promptly ordered equipment to be brought in. This was the newly developed golden alloy diving suit for the Navy. The suit weighed over 150 pounds. He demanded that Carl wear the suit and walk 12 steps on his own. Note 12 steps is the benchmark for a master diver. So far, no one had passed that test. The goal was to intimidate Carl into backing down. But Carl boldly agreed, saying he could do it right away. He was too used to being treated unfairly, and too used to giving his all every single time. At that moment, the commander burst in and helped Carl into the diving suit. He reminded Carl the prosthetic leg had very low load-bearing capacity. It was like kindling easy to snap if forced to bear 150 pounds of weight. "If you go 6 steps, you'll pass out." But Carl refused to back down, firmly asking for the helmet to be placed on him. After measuring the 12 steps, the commander signaled for the test to begin. When an assistant tried to help Carl, that little punk stirred up trouble again. He said, "Regulations changed last week. Navy divers must stand up on their own." So Carl endured the tremendous weight and struggled to rise. Every muscle on his face trembled. Then, he pushed forward with all his might. At first, he barely managed to balance. But by the 5th step, his prosthetic began to creak. By step 8, it was visibly bending. Carl cried from the pain. Shards were digging into his flesh. Everyone gasped. Even the young judge prepared to declare the test a failure. Stay right there. Don't move. Diver, you don't need to pay attention to him. Follow my command, you damn brat. Move forward. You owe me 12 steps. 9. A Navy diver is not a combat soldier. He is a rescue specialist. 10. If something is lost at sea, he is responsible for finding it. If it sinks to the bottom, he must recover it. If it blocks the way, he must remove it. 11. If he's lucky, he might die 200 feet under the sea, because that's the most basic requirement to be a hero. I don't understand why so many people want to be Navy divers. Now come and report to me. Cook. Carl did it. He used determination and extraordinary action to speak to those who tried to stop his progress. My fate is mine to decide, not heaven's. When the helmet was removed, the generals beside him were brought to tears. Finally, the young commander also realized that there is a strength of belief even greater than physical existence. He stood up and announced Carl's reinstatement. He returned honor to this old soldier. This is a true story from 1970. In the end, Carl fulfilled his lifelong dream and became the first black master diver in U.S. Navy history. After that, he served 9 more years in the Navy before retiring with honor. A sincere heart will illuminate the road to ideals. The quote engraved by his father did not only become Carl's lifelong principle, but also an encouragement to each of us. You should know that every force that keeps us stuck in place can become the driving force to move forward. So, when you encounter difficulties that seem impossible, try your hardest and never give up. That's the end of today's story. Thank you all for watching. What did you think of the film? Comment below.